you're very welcome to the podcast. My name is Anita Moran and I'm the founder of the Femcast, a podcast and website driven by a passion for empowering women and promoting gender equality. Through the Femcast, we are making it our mission to educate, empower and encourage women to harness the power of their voices, share their stories and raise awareness of the crucial issues affecting women today. By amplifying women's voices, the Femcast aims to strengthen women's rights and celebrate the achievements of women everywhere. We are passionate about making a positive impact through storytelling, advocacy, and creating a supportive community to act as an inspiration to others who aspire to effect change. Come visit our website www.thefemcast.com for more information on what we do and resources to help you. Introducing the Bullied Brain Series with esteemed educator and bestselling author Dr Fraser from her book of the same name. Today we're going to delve into the fascinating world of neuroscience. It turns out bullying and abuse leaves lasting physical wounds on the brain. Drawn upon Jen's extensive research and experience, we present an evidence-based, step-by-step plan to repair the harm inflicted upon victims. Jen's groundbreaking book, renowned as the most comprehensive scientific treatment of the subject, serves as the foundation for our discussions. Jen brings brain science to the forefront, challenging outdated beliefs surrounding bullying and abuse. By highlighting the neurological scars trauma leaves on the brain through advanced imaging techniques, we will discover some remarkable truths.
So, myself and Jenny have been talking for nearly a year now. This is Jenny's book, The Bullied Brain. You heard the introduction there earlier. So, Jenny, I'd like you to tell our listeners what it is you do and how you came about to write this absolutely brilliant book that's going to change and save lives.
Well, Anita, it all began with I have a PhD in comparative literature, so I'm a trained researcher, basically. We were trained to take different discourses out of their silos and put them into the arena and see if it changed the conversation. So I got, like, almost to the day that my book was published, which was April 1st last year, 2022, literally 10 years earlier, I'd gotten pulled into a bullying situation at a private school. And I was told that it wasn't a big deal, that it was, nothing to get excited about. It, could be definitely just dealt with, no problem. And it involved these teenagers. And there was a lot of fear and a lot of humiliation and a lot of favoritism. So it was a classic bullying dynamic whereby there's a few targets and then everybody else is sort of given these privileged positions. So they're afraid to speak up. They don't want to intervene. They don't want to become a target themselves. Just a classic bullying situation. Homophobic slurs, yelling in the face, grabbing, the victim and holding them in for more, this kind of stuff. Just typical. We can all envision it. The problem was, it wasn't students doing it to students. It was teachers doing it to students. And that's where it became a huge issue. So when I was told it's not a big deal, whatever, they're just trying to toughen these kids up for a tough world, no big deal. I thought to myself, I wonder what the research says. So I started reading the psychology, and it was bad news. Really, really, that type of behavior from an adult to a child, especially an adult in a position of trust and authority to a child, is incredibly destructive. I read the psychiatry, same thing. This is serious. It does lasting harm. It causes all these problems. And then I hit the neuroscience. And from that time, 10 years ago, well, it's 11 now, I've never looked back, because I realized as an educator myself and as a parent and as a researcher, this information is a game changer and it's stuck in the neuroscience laboratories. It is not reaching us and everyone needs to know it. So I set myself the task of reading the neuroscience as a layperson. I mean, if I can read it and understand it, anybody can, because I am not a scientist. And I read all the conclusions of what they had found out from what all forms of bullying and abuse actually do to the brain. And just the as you know from the book, it's very detailed and there's lots of research and it's replicated and peer reviewed and extensive. So there's 20 years at least of neuroscientific research on this issue. So I put it into the book in footnotes. It's not overwhelming. Anyone can read it. But the key takeaway for your audience is, and everyone needs to know this, all forms of bullying and abuse, that includes social relational bullying, that is cyberbullying, that is emotional neglect, it is harassing, berating, humiliating, however you want to target the person. It does not have to touch the body to do significant damage to the brain. We ignore our brains because we can't see them. But if we could see into our brains, and we can now with non-invasive technology, MRIs, EEGs, fMRIs, neuroscientists can see what bullying and abuse do to the brain. And what it does is leave neurological scars. It dismantles brain architecture. It does untold harm to brains. And people don't even know they have a brain injury because our society doesn't talk about it, doesn't talk about the research, doesn't talk about the brain. So this is the message that matters so much to me, that I've worked incredibly hard to articulate so that we can all start talking about it as a community and change the way we treat one another, we raise children, we conduct our workplaces, we have politics. I mean, it impacts everything.
That's brilliant that you can see it on an MRI. I actually had one done myself a few months ago, and I'm going back again. But can we talk about the brain health? Let's start with, firstly, children. It's adult children, and then it's peer to peer, and then of course it's in the workplace, and it goes into relationships. But what happens to the brain when it's bullied? Like, what shuts down? What doesn't work? What is enhanced? So that we understand what is actually happening to it.
So neuroscientists would say that we have to understand sort of some key principles. One key principle is every single one of us has a unique brain. So bullying is going to affect my brain differently than it affects your brain. My childhood, my conditioning, my experience in the workplace, all of those things have shaped my brain even more to be diverse and different from yours, let's say, and everybody else's. So you can't say that how a certain person reacts to something is kind of the gold standard. That's how it is, because our brains are unique. They're as unique as our fingerprints. That's one key thing. Second key thing is the brain operates like an electrical network. So I'm going to talk about some parts of the brain or some regions or areas or involvements in the brain, but neuroscientists are quick to say that's not how brains work. They work as an elaborate interconnected system. So keep that in the back of your mind while I'm going to say this next part about, okay, how does bullying and abuse impact the brain? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that they see in brain imagery is the amygdala, which is a part of the brain involved in many things, but one of its key roles in the brain is as a threat detector. So imagine if you're going into a toxic workplace every single day, or you're going into a school where there's a bullying individual, or even worse, a bullying adult who's going to humiliate you in front of your peers, or yell at you, or put you down, or hit you with homophobic slurs, all these kinds of things. Imagine your brain is going into that situation. The amygdala is really on hypervigilant. It's activated. It's overactive because it's anticipating a threat. And the brain and the body are designed to interpret threats as if they're predators. Of course, we were designed by evolution to survive. So the brain still thinks we're out, on the Serengeti, protecting ourselves from predators that will take our lives. So it preps us, and everybody knows this, but they don't really understand the implications. The body and the brain prep us for fight, for flight, and to freeze. These are very animalistic responses. The sad thing is the individuals who are out there being incredibly aggressive and oppressive and domineering and violent and full of rage and trying to push other people away or control them, those people are in fight. And when your sympathetic nervous system is activated and you're acting like a highly aggressive animal, like think of a dog baring its teeth and growling and its hair is all standing on end. A dog gets like that, even though you're not threatening to it at all. In fact, you'd like to reach out and pat the dog. You're going to care for it. You're going to feed it. It interprets you as a terrible threat. Why? Because it's been beaten in the past. So when we see these individuals who are manifesting bullying behaviors, they actually are just as much as their victims doing harm to their brains because they're pumping up their cortisol. And cortisol is a stress hormone. Well, it does many things, but it's a stress hormone in these situations. And it's incredibly harmful to the brain and incredibly harmful to the body if it's getting overactivated. It's meant to deal with a predator and then calm right down. And predators aren't supposed to be an everyday affair. They're a rare, frightening, unfortunate moment in your life. They're not meant to be your daily workplace. They're not meant to be your home where you go home to a violent, individual or a humiliating individual. They're not meant to be in relationships or in schools or sports or any of these places. So if you're daily getting your sympathetic nervous system activated, it's pushing you into bullying mode, fight mode, or trying to run away, get away, escape from it, flight mode, or just getting paralyzed, freeze mode, so that you don't know what to say or do even, and you can't work or be productive or learn. That's coming from a very activated amygdala. And in the brains of people who are highly aggressive, like murderers, the amygdala appears enlarged on a brain scan. So it's taking tons of brain resources away from problem solving and creativity and connection and empathy and all these miraculous things our brains can do because it's so afraid all the time. So the sad thing is, or the key thing to understand on the spectrum is, the bullying individual is hurting their brain as much as they're hurting the brain of the victim. Two systems are getting highly activated, pumped full of cortisol. The cortisol not only dismantles brain architecture in very serious ways, it also does damage to blood vessels. It is correlated with heart disease, diabetes, cancer. This is why children that grow up in adversity, and this has been known since the late 1990s and is still not made significant change in our society, which is tragic. We know that kids that are growing up in adversity, so sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, physical neglect and emotional neglect, unloving homes where parents are too busy or too distracted or too caught up in their own issues to care and nurture and love the child. All of those things are markers of adversity, and adversity is correlated with midlife chronic disease and shortened lifespan. So it's something that's preventable. It's something that we could change in our society by really learning the science and applying it to how we treat each other and how we treat kids. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you two more examples of what they see on brain scans of people who have been bullied and abused. This is why it's so important to do EEGs and do MRIs of people's brains, because we need to know. We should really know what's going on, just like we get our teeth checked and we get an x-ray done when we have a broken arm, and we have ways to see if there's an ACL tear or something. We need to do the same kind of check with the brain because it can be seen. We need to assess it. Anyway, two other things that they see is, to give examples, the corpus callosum is a tight bundle of fibers. It's the connecting link between the right and the left hemisphere. And it's really important for the left and the right to be able to communicate with each other at very high speeds and with great efficiency. And so it's myelinated. And myelin is a fatty insulator that helps electrical messages be much more efficient and much quicker in the brain. Well, in a person that's been bullied and abused, the myelin is eroded on their corpus callosum. So the brain is sluggish. It's not communicating with great efficacy. And then a final thing that they see is the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain involved in self-awareness and learning and memory and tagging memories with emotional tags and all of that. Like, it's just the seat of learning and memory in the brain. And it will appear shrunken and shriveled if it's constantly being bathed in cortisol. And that is very serious. And I just want to say super fast at the end of all this bad news, I just want all of your listeners to know that when I was researching and finding out what the neuroscientists knew about what happens to brains that are bullied and abused, I also found out every single step of the way There's all kinds of evidence-based ways to get our brains healthy again. We can restore and repair our brains no matter what's being done to them. It's miraculous. And so I spend a lot of time in the book, as you know, talking about how do we get better, because we can get
Yes.
better.
Yes. It's fascinating, isn't it? And that's where I know myself when it happened to me, the fogginess and forgetfulness, and that's that part of the brain that's and the other parts that are shrunken because of the bullying. Isn't it incredible what it does and what a person can do to your brain? Like they may as well be taking a baseball bat to you daily when you go
It's
into the workplace.
That's exactly it. And it makes me crazy to hear all this talk about long COVID. Oh, long COVID, one of the symptoms is brain fog. It's like, why are we not talking every single day on the front page of the newspaper about how all forms of bullying and abuse cause brain fog? Because they do. Your brain is so caught up in protecting itself and ensuring your survival that it can't do anything. It's muddled, it's unclear, it's not able to focus and concentrate. It's constantly distracted by fear, basically.
Alan Ball put up a brilliant post yesterday on LinkedIn. He's the director of White Ribbon Australia. He's bringing awareness to people that bullying in the workplace is domestic abuse and domestic violence. It doesn't have to be behind closed doors with an intimate partner. They've now named it. And I've been saying this for years. The behaviours are the same because I did a course on responsible reporting on domestic abuse and gender-based violence. And I also did a course on understanding domestic abuse, gender-based violence. That triggered all the behaviours of the person that bullied me. That triggered me because I was like, this is domestic abuse and violence. Yet all these things are happening in the workplace. And it's
Oh,
just a brilliant post yesterday that Alan did and brought awareness to people.
and I would love to build on that and say that that was the thing that I found so startling and disturbing in the abuse that was happening at the school, because I knew these teachers personally. I'd seen them day in, day out, charming, lovely people, smart, kind, thoughtful. I'd never seen them yell. I'd never seen them use a put down. I'd never seen them swearing. And I'd never seen them aggressively getting up in the face of another adult, grabbing them, holding them in to yell in their face and humiliate them publicly. Never seen any of these behaviors. Just like with domestic abuse, as we
Mm,
all know, the perpetrator goes out and is utterly charming at the workplace, goes home and beats his wife or kills
hmm
her or his children or her children.
hmm
Okay, so we all know that. Well, imagine this school situation. Here's these people. They're so lovely. They're Dr. Jekylls, right? Behind the closed doors of the space where they are with children and there's no one else watching, they turn into Mr. Hyde. They become these violent, just like a domestic violence person. They are all of a sudden it's gender based. When you've got men in positions of trust and authority calling boys fucking pussies and fucking soft and grow some balls, you've got gender-based violence happening. They are attacking the masculinity of these young teenagers. It's incredible. And what I found amazing in this whole process was when I was shining a spotlight on how incredibly harmful and destructive this was, and they had to be held accountable. It had to stop. They had to stop because they might hurt other children. I was treated as if I was somehow a problem employee. And I know you know this intimately. This is what
mm,
happens. If you dare to speak up about abuse, if you refuse to enable it and normalize it and look the other way and dismiss it and deny it, you are the problem. You have committed the crime of speaking up against normalized abuse in our society. And that's why I brought the science in, because I can listen to these people go on and on and on. And my question to them always is, really, show me the research. What does the research say? And that's the best way to debunk all these bullying and abuse myths, is with research. It's with science.
yeah. Can we talk a bit about, for the people who are going to go out and get the book, we can talk a bit about the whistleblowing and how you brought it out and brought it into the public.
Well, so what happened was, of course, like, this is very typical behavior for a whistleblower. You internally try to address the situation. So of course I did all the things by the book I'm supposed to do. I went and originally spoke to the secretary of the board at the school. He then said, you need to take this to the headmaster, took it to the headmaster. The headmaster then said, oh, this is very serious. We're going to do all these things to remedy the situation. He then spoke to the teachers involved. He said that they were incredibly sorry. They had no idea that what they were doing was harmful. And then the next day he wrote, and this is all on email. The next day he wrote and said, oh, sorry, I have to presume that they're innocent. It's like, really? They just told you that they did all these things. How could you, like, that doesn't make sense. How could you presume that they're innocent? That doesn't make sense. So that's when we started to realize that, things were maybe not going to be up and up. It wasn't going to unfold as people were promising in positions of power to do something about it.
Mm.
So I have legal duty to report if my administration does not report to the teacher regulation branch where I live in British Columbia. So I contacted them and said, look, I'm in this situation. They're not reporting to you. Do I need to report to you right now? Like, how do I do this? And they said, no, give them a chance to fix the situation, to sort it out, to discipline, and then they report to us. So, don't do it yet. And I was like, oh, okay. So the headmaster hired a lawyer, and he then wrote a report. And then the headmaster said, oh, no one can read the report. He suppressed it. So to this day, none of us know. Well, there was about 30 parents involved at this point, and 14 kids at least had come forward to report the abuse, to give testimonies to the headmaster, all this kind of thing. And he wouldn't let anybody read the report. And so then they wanted to get another lawyer. So they roped parents in as if they were part of the choosing of the next lawyer. They brought this lawyer in, and they loved his report. He wrote a 10-page report that is, honestly, it's just a legal travesty. It's embarrassing to read, 10 pages of garbage. And this guy, his report was published widely by the headmaster. And it basically positioned the students who had spoken up to report they were being abused, it positioned them as, in the words of an anonymous other student, telling nasty lies. And it positioned the parents as trying to hijack, these teachers' department. So that's when I was like, oh boy, this is really serious. He's re-victimizing publicly. He's breaching confidentiality. Like, there should have been no other people should have known anything about this. He had students directly giving him interviews and testimony, and he's publicly humiliating them, basically. So, and by this point, we had found out from another parent who has it on email that he'd already gone directly to one of the teachers and told them some of the kids that had spoken up. So really breaching confidentiality. Like, that's just not allowed. And so the kids, of course, just felt completely betrayed. It's their headmaster. They were so betrayed by this. And the impact on them, going back to brain fog, I mean, we're talking depression, self-medication with drugs, not going to school, not writing exams, not going to graduation. Like, it was tragic to watch, really. It was awful. And so I reported to the teacher regulation branch. And that's when I started to see how things were very unusual in that regard as well. I can see the headmaster and the chaplain and the secretary of the board, we found out that they'd all been informed a year earlier before I came forward. They were informed by a lawyer that child abuse was occurring, and they hadn't done anything effective to protect children or inform parents. So they were negligent. So they had to ensure that abuse had to disappear because they were actually on the line. And so they were highly motivated to cover up.
Child abuse carries a wide meaning. Can you be more specific when you say child abuse?
Well, to give you an example, one student was repeatedly assaulted. So the assaults that took place publicly in front of other students reported it. They said it was vicious. They said they wanted to stop it, but they couldn't because it was a teacher. So to give you an example, the teacher would stop the class, everything going on, tell this one same student over and over again, hundreds of times, to come up in front of him, and then he'd start yelling in the student's face. So that's an assault right away. When you're imagine at work, in the workplace, you've got your boss, but it's way higher power because it's a teacher over a student. It's an adult over a child. You've got your boss yelling in your face in front of everybody else. No one's moving a muscle. Everyone's terrified. He's yelling at you. And then at a certain point, you can't take it anymore. It was rhetorical questions. Do you even deserve to be here? You're the best, and you're not even trying. This kind of thing, rhetorical questions. And then you decide you're going to try and get away. You've got to get away from this assault on you. And it's terrifying, right? Assault doesn't need to touch the body to be an assault. It just needs to make you feel afraid that the person might go one step further. They might hurt you. They might grab you. They might do anything. And this guy was supposedly this, like, the rage was incredible. So the student would try and get away, and the assault intensifies. He would grab the student, hold them in to continue yelling in their face. That's an assault. That is physical abuse. On top of that, there was a great deal of psychological, emotional abuse. And teachers in British Columbia are held to a very high standard, like lawyers are. If a teacher is off duty, out and about in the community, and behaves in a way like, say, is drunken and disorderly, or causes a fight, or is inappropriate in some way, they can be held accountable by the teacher regulation branch, because they are besmirching the teaching profession. And the teaching profession and the education system in our country has to be robust. It has to be something trusted and respected if people are going to put their vulnerable children into it. So we teachers are held to an incredibly high standard. So these teachers were, with homophobic slurs, they're basically breaching the Charter of Human Rights. It's discriminatory behavior. They're breaching human rights. They were calling the students fucking retards. So that is a disability breach, and just a constant barrage of fear, humiliation, and favoritism, which create the conditions, even in a university, where individuals are not allowed to conduct themselves that way with students.
Right. That's incredible that they were able to get away with it for so long.
Well, what's even more incredible, Anita, is that the Commissioner for Teacher Regulation, who's politically appointed, and was appointed by a political party that was very interested in even going to the lengths of doing illegal acts that they got held accountable for at the Supreme Court of Canada, or Supreme Court of British Columbia. They were working double time to get more enrollment in private schools, because it saves them a huge amount of money. If parents are paying a great deal of money for these students in school, the government is saving money. So they were very interested in the private school crisis, the abuse crisis, disappearing. So the Commissioner for Teacher Regulation covered it all up. I have the reports sitting in my house right now. I'm not allowed to show them to anybody. I've got 6 reports, and they are absolutely, I could show you step by step the corruption in them, but I'm not allowed to show them to anybody.
All right. So this is how The Bullied Brain, the book, came about, when you dug down into the whole injuries, the neuroscience. So the brain is injured, and then it manifests in the body. So what are we looking at from a brain injury then manifesting in the body?
Well, it's what we have to do is there's a fabulous neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio, and he calls his work Descartes' error, because Descartes was the philosopher back in the day, 17th century, who said, "I think, therefore I am." And that's when we started to separate the brain and the body and think that they were 2 separate entities. They're not. The brain is part of the body. So everything that we do, from what we eat, to the exercise we do, to the mindfulness we practice, to the bullying that we might do in the day, all of these things, they're impacting the brain and the body simultaneously, because the brain is part of the body. So one of the things legally I'm looking forward to seeing in the future is people understanding that if you're injuring somebody's brain, it's physical abuse. You don't have to touch them to cause physical abuse to their brains. It could be seen on a brain scan. Why is that not physical abuse? And, we live in a society still that's so outdated and so old-fashioned that we use terms like psychological injury or a psychologically safe workplace. Really, what we need to start talking about is brain injury and a brain-safe environment. So why would we create environments where the body is safe, where, and this is something that I write about, I try to use it as an analogy, you're not allowed to go into the workplace and smoke. Why is that? Well, because smoke, I'm not smoking a cigarette, and the smoker's not forcing it into my face, but I'm breathing in secondhand smoke without having any kind of contact with them at all. And you can't see the damage it's doing to my lungs with the naked eye. You can't see it. You could with an X-ray. And when an X-ray shows the damage to lungs that are filling with tar from secondhand smoke, which is far worse than firsthand smoke, Then we decided absolutely no more smoking in the workplace. In fact, you can't smoke around the building. How is it possible that in the 21st century, with 20 years of neuroscience, we are not saying the same things about bullying and abusive behaviors? They should be instantly treated like secondhand smoke. You get caught doing that, sorry, you get a huge fine or you get reprimanded. It goes on your record. And then the next time, again, it goes on your record, you get another fine.
Well, we're fighting here at the moment to get it criminalized
It should be.
because of, well, the injuries, psychological, and it manifesting in the body. I know for myself, I see a cardiologist now, but all the other problems that comes with it, that we've been talking to hundreds of people over the last 9 months, myself and a lady called Jennifer Foster. She has set up Bullied 2 movement, which is gonna it's grown legs already, and it's gonna be as huge as the Me Too movement, because we have to better protect workers. They're going in with no protection. If you step onto a site tomorrow, you have to have a hard hat. But because we don't see the brain, because nobody is taking it serious, and we have to have psychologically or brain safe, as we should start calling it now, brain safe workplaces.
Absolutely, we need brain safe workplaces. And I love that the idea of the hard hat. We protect feet. You have to have steel toed boots, but we don't protect the brain, which is the absolute center of everything. So I want to circle back to the sympathetic nervous system. That's fight, flight, freeze. So we talked about how cortisol is doing damage to the brain when it's getting repeatedly activated. The same thing is happening to the heart. This is why heart problems are correlated with unsafe work environments for brains. Why are they connected? Why are they correlated? Because when your body and your brain are ramping you up, they release adrenaline, then they release cortisol. And the adrenaline and the cortisol make your heart rate go through the roof. It increases your blood pressure. It causes oxygen to go into your brain so that you can see better, make faster decisions, because it's preparing you to fight the predator. If you go to work every single day and the predator is your coworker, or even worse, your boss, or you go to a school and the predator is a teacher, then you are getting your heart activated over and over and over again. You're making it work way too hard. And this is why heart problems are very connected to bullying and abuse.
Oh, don't I know it? I had a heart, I was brought into hospital with 189. It took 4 days to get it down.
That's what I'm saying.
It was just mad how I didn't understand what was happening to me, but my body was acting it was, if I was around that person, it'd just react violently.
Because it interprets the person as a predator.
Yeah.
It's like you're getting face to face with a saber-toothed tiger, and your brain is telling you that you've got to get away, that it's dangerous, and one of the things that people just don't seem to grasp is that if we understood the sympathetic nervous system and how, in fact, our blood pressure goes through the roof, our heart rate is going through the roof, we're pumping blood into our muscles, we're taking it out of rest and digest, we're taking it away from the gastrointestinal, which means, kids are telling you all the time they've got a stomach ache. They've got pain in their stomach. You go into a pharmacy and you will see a wall of medication for gastrointestinal issues. Do people know that if they are in constant toxic chronic stress situations in like the workplace or the home or their school or their sport, do they know that the reason why they have terrible digestive problems is because the blood is getting pumped everywhere else in the body because it's under threat all the time? No, they don't. We don't even teach these basic concepts to people. So like you said, you're in the hospital and your heart rate's 189. It's like, and you don't know that it's connected to the fact that you're in an abusive workplace. That should be common knowledge. And I mean, this is the big push of Bullied 2. This is the big push of the bullied brain.
Yeah.
We just have to get the science out there. It's so empowering. It's going to be so inspiring and so empowering for the individuals that are trapped in the aggressive, bullying paradigm themselves, who need as much help as the victims do. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be held accountable. And I'm not saying that what they do isn't massively destructive. I just know from the brain science that if we caught them early, when I always think of people like Dr. Larry Nassar or Harvey Weinstein or Mike Rice, that emotionally abusive coach. If you caught those guys early, the first time the reports came in that they're being abusive in their 20s, let's say, you could rehabilitate those brains. But instead, we let them abuse for 30 years. That multiple reports come in, it gets covered up over and over and over again. This is the broken system in which we are operating, and it's got to change. It's so unhealthy.
It's massively unhealthy, but not just for the person that's going through it, it's their families as well and their children. I've even met nurses who husbands and partners have gone through it, and because obviously attending the hospital. It's just so rampant. Jen, in the book, you talk about recovery and how we can help the brains. Like the first half hour there was all what happens to the brains, but it's important people know, and especially those who are bullies because they're damaging their own brain as well. But if we talk about how you can recover, relearn, and heal your scars and heal your brain.
Yeah, it's the most important piece. So I was very, very privileged to have Dr. Michael Merzenich, who's one of the world's leading neuroscientists. He's one of the most highly awarded, most important neuroscientists alive today. And he is referred to in scientific circles as the father of neuroplasticity. And he wrote the foreword to the book, and then he went through the book with a fine-tooth comb to make positive sure that as a layperson, I wasn't making any mistakes with the science. And at the end of it, he said, he sent me an email and he said, this is the most completely thorough treatment of the science on this subject on planet Earth. And basically, what everyone needs to know is neuroplasticity means, so it's Michael Merzenich's research with many, many other neuroscientists now. But what neuroplasticity means is that we all have the capacity to change our brains. Our brains are dynamic and they are constantly changing until our final moment on the planet. And we can change really positively. We can strengthen our brain. We can rewire our brain based on our practices. And you can see the changes on a brain scan. So if you are somebody who defaults to bullying, abusive, aggressive, very threatened, activated behaviors due to your own past, you can change that. If you are a person that goes right into flight mode and tries to escape from any type of confrontation and is unable to stand up for yourself and doesn't seek resources and community to push back, you can change that. We can all change our brains. And so I packed the book full of the research on all the different evidence-based ways that we can make sure that if our brain is being hurt, that we can repair it. If our brain is being hurt, we can restore our organic brain health, just like we can with the body. So our brains are innately wired for healing. And that's the key takeaway from your and my talk today, and all the exchanges that we have and the discussion and dialogue that we have. That's the key. And I know it was hugely important for you to learn these practices and you put them into practice yourself.
Massively, because just for the listeners, how I discovered you and started working with you was I was looking at a way to heal and to get better because I just felt so stuck. I was just in a cycle of depression, anxiety, and I reached out to you. I started talking to you. I got the book and I went, now, I have to say the last 6 months have been really great for me with the healing. I worked and worked and worked really hard. Myself and Jen have recorded other episodes, which I feel looking back at them, I don't look as great in them. Not about physically, but I mean, I could see the sadness and I can see how heavy I am in myself. You know, that heaviness that you carry when this has happened to you. You carry yourself differently. But today, I'm not that person I was 6 months ago, a year ago, thankfully. And a lot of that has to do as well that I don't have them in my lives. They're out of it, which is brilliant, and they've no access to me anymore. But I worked so hard. I worked consistently and I had a discipline because I really wanted to get well again. I didn't want to be having to take anything for anxiety. I didn't want to be afraid. There was this awful fear that maybe people will relate to out there, or they don't know what's happening to them. But I used to wake up afraid, and I have this awful fear every day, whether it was like getting a message in from them, an email. It was just constant anxiety. I don't have that anymore, which is brilliant. But I did work hard on it, and the exercises are brilliant. If you'd like to just talk about one or two of them to help people.
Well, I'm very glad you spoke about your personal experience with doing the exercises, because I think the key takeaway is it's not a quick fix.
It's
The
not.
best, no, it's hard work. It's really hard work.
Mhm,
It's hard, and it takes daily, consistent
mhm.
practice. But, I want people to remember too that, the brain learns by making mistakes. The brain learns by falling apart and failing at certain things. That's how it discovers different ways
To do things. Yeah.
to do things. Yeah. And so you don't need to feel bad if you miss a day, or you don't do the practice properly or whatever. So basically, yeah, I mean, as you know, Anita, in the book, I looked at the research into all these different activities we can do to get our brains back online. And I really spend a lot of time on getting people to visualize their brains and even to speak with them, so that it's your mind that you want to be putting in the driver's seat, so to speak. Your brain is the engine and it gives you all of the drive, but it's always your mind that consciously recognizes what the situation is. So to be able to say to yourself, I'm getting an email from an abusive person. It's not a predator brain. Don't worry. We don't need to have a big reaction here. We don't need to get the heart rate going. Calm down. I'm in charge of this. I'm going to read a 21st century email. I have to deal with these people to sort it out. There's lawyers involved, whatever. And so you start talking to your brain and letting it know that you're in charge and you're making very conscious, very intentional, and very mindful decisions about things. So, and one of the things that I also talk about is what happens to people is it's a self-protective thing that's well documented in the psychology and psychiatry, is the idea of identifying with the aggressor. It's a natural impulse to identify with the aggressor and blame yourself for what's happening. And I call that internalizing the aggressor, or internalizing what I call a mind bully that's in your head. And so you start to put yourself down. You start to think that you're incapable. So you're starting to feel a lot of anxiety. You're starting to feel hopeless. You're starting to feel depressed. You have all these things that make you feel powerless, like you just want to save all your resources, crawl into bed, and not ever get out again. So you're not feeling strong. You don't trust yourself. That's the mind bully. You've internalized the aggressor, and you somehow are holding yourself accountable for harm that came from the outside. So I try to get people to work really hard to replace that voice and that destructive figure in your head with being very clear about the abusive individual. They are totally separate from you. They're on their own trajectory. They've had their own traumas. They're doing whatever. They're bullying people, whatever. They're hurting their own brain. Doesn't matter. That's not your department brain. You got to let it go. And you very consciously surrounding yourself with people who support you, care about you, see you, have empathy. So really getting people to start out with self empathy, or I call it the empathic coach, where it's a little bit like cognitive behavioral theory, but it's less sort of just the words, and it's more about how you feel and treat yourself, recognizing that you are separate from the aggressor. So I think that's like an example of a really important step that people need to take. Then a chapter, an activation exercise on fitness. Going back to the heart, aerobic fitness is one of the best ways to reduce cortisol in the brain and body. Not only does it reduce cortisol, the stress hormone we talked about, activated by the sympathetic nervous system, not only does it reduce it, but it also prevents it from causing more harm down the road. You get stronger. The more you consistently exercise, especially in nature, getting out and walking and hiking and swimming, whatever it is that you want to do, playing sports. Sports are brilliant. If you get out and move in nature, you are constantly empowering your brain to control your cortisol levels. Super healthy. Mindfulness, yes, it's an ancient Eastern practice. They've been doing it for thousands of years. It is now well documented in the neuroscientific research to be incredibly healing and repairing and calming for your brain and body. So again, it takes time to just start small, start with 10 minutes a day, build up to 27 minutes a day. Within 8 weeks, they see on brain scans significant change. And you start to feel peaceful, and you start to feel less worry and less anxiety. And all it takes is 8 weeks of 27 minutes a day to see these changes.
Yeah. Isn't that incredible?
It's
That you can be
incredible.
so damaged, because we need to help the kids, we need to help the women that are in the abusive relationships and the men, and we need to get in with the science early and teach everybody and bring them. Just on the series that myself and Jen are doing, we are in the next episode, we will be talking about raising awareness and how you can join and spread the knowledge on the brain science. And then we go into domestic violence, domestic abuse, gender-based violence. We talk about narcissists and psychopaths. We talk about bullying in schools and how to help their relationships. And we have loads of different people through all walks of life's generations, and get the science out there, because we got to bring this to the government. We got to bring this everywhere to get help for people coming up along. And education is key. So we don't have bullies, and we don't have people sick, and we don't have women dying, and we don't have children going to prison when they become adults, because we hit on that, the statistics of kids that were bullied in school or that were bullies that end up in prison later on in life. So that's what the series is about. It's about brain science and getting the knowledge out there.
Sorry, Anita. I just wanted to say one more thing in that regard, because you brought up something so important that your listeners absolutely need to hear. We have a tendency to treat these things as moral when in actual fact they're medical. So if you look at the California prison system, and these are statistics I share at the beginning of the book, in the California prison system, which is enormous, 70%, 70% of inmates were in foster care.
Mhm.
These are traumatized brains. Is incarceration going to heal them or help them or eliminate their trauma and give them a second chance when they've already been dealt a terrible hand of cards as kids? It's so awful. It's so unfair. It's so backwards. There's no science being brought to bear at all. And I mean, it costs our society so much. It costs the government billions of dollars when all they need to do is invest upstream with education, teaching children from the beginning and all the way up to adults how to care for their brains, make their brains really healthy. So, what I'm really excited about is, I've lived through two scientific revolutions. The first one was about smoking. I was raised believing that smoking was good for your health. It made you sophisticated like a Hollywood actress. It made
Mm.
you independent and tough like the Marlboro man out in his horse on the cowboy range. I grew up believing that. Everyone smoked around me. Teachers, university profs, parents, grandparents, your doctor would smoke a cigarette while he wrote your prescription. That's how much smoking was normal and treated as if it was a non-issue in my childhood. That ended. We now know that smoking is really dangerous. We know that from x-rays, it causes tumors, it causes tar. It is so dangerous. And the government has stepped in and made sure that they never let us forget that if we want to smoke a cigarette, we have to look at a package with blackened lungs on it or damage to the throat and the mouth. They make us see it every single time. They don't let kids buy it. So where is the government when it comes now to the scientific revolution of brain science? They've known for 20 years how much we need to protect our brain health and how much we can enhance it. So the second scientific revolution I lived through was the fitness revolution in the 1980s. We learned that if we just danced around and we put a headband on and we pulled our shoulder down and put on some leggings and looked like Jane Fonda and jumped about to music, we could greatly increase our health and vitality and well-being and our happiness, because we learned that fitness, aerobic fitness, was incredibly good for the body. We now know that aerobic fitness is incredibly good for the brain. So let's have a brain fitness revolution. Let's get everybody healthier and happier and kinder, because kindness and connection are some of the things that the brain most desperately needs. The brain puts connection and community ahead of shelter and food. It cannot develop properly without community and connection. That's how important it is. So bullying, there's no place for it. It doesn't belong. It's as unhealthy as smoking.
Brilliant. The book is fantastic. It's out, it's on Amazon. You can get it there, download it on your Kindle. It's called The Bullied Brain. And we will be running a series on the podcast every week. We're launching the first 3 episodes. So there's 3 episodes here now. You can watch. Please subscribe down below. Let us know, leave comments and reviews. We very much appreciate that. And Jenny, look forward to talking to you next week when we're talking
too,
and raising
Anita.
more awareness. Thanks a million.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Femcast. We invite you now to stay connected with us by hitting the subscribe buttons below and follow us across our social media channels at the Femcast. We value your feedback and reviews. By sharing ideas, insights and experiences, we can all learn, grow and make a meaningful difference. We also want to remind you that we care about your well-being. If any topics discussed on today's episode have raised concerns or you need support, please visit our website www.thefemcast.com for helpful resources and phone numbers. Thank you for being part of the Femcast.